Everyone, thank you for joining me today. And I want to consider this question of what it is that dramatic actors express with language. By dramatic actors here, I just mean actors on stage and screen as opposed to, agents who are out there acting in the world. And the big picture from the philosophy of the theater here I want to get at through this is, well, what just exactly is it that makes good acting compelling and aesthetically valuable in its own right? And the hope is that figuring out what it is that actors express with language in contrast to just what you and I express with language in our day-to-day lives, that will go some way toward answering that larger question of what makes acting aesthetically compelling. Saki Zamir is pretty much the only philosopher who's really been exploring this extensively, so I'm going to be borrowing a lot of his ideas, trying to expand upon them and defend them from some suggestions throughout the course of this talk. So let's get to it. What do actors express with their voice? Well, there's one really easy answer to this question, which is just to say, well, they express the meaning of the play script. When an actor plays Oedipus, he's expressing the meaning of the play Oedipus Rex written by Sophocles. So this is an idea that goes back to Aristotle that conceives of actors as pretty much just being conduits for a literary work. And that is what actors are expressing with their voice. Now, a lot of people have taken issue with this, and they say, well, no, look, actors are doing more than merely transmitting a literary text. They're doing something else. So that leads us to a second answer, where you might say that, well, these actors, they do something other than just transmit the literary work. They provide an interpretation of that work. And they may be able to express themselves with their voice or express things with their voice that contribute to that interpretation. In particular, when they speak lines or sign them even, they're able to resolve certain ambiguities that might be left open in the mere textual presentation of those lines, in the same way that speaking or signing resolves all sorts of ambiguities, be they semantic, pragmatic, or syntactic. Actors are also able to elaborate on the fictions that are presented in a play script. So, for example, the accent in which they speak might tell us something about the region that the character is from, or tell us something about the socioeconomic background of that character. Similarly, if you take a line like King Lear's, after his daughter Cordelia refuses to give him this overweening praise that her sisters have given him, he says, "Nothing will come of nothing." Now, an actor could do all sorts of things that makes the meaning that's expressed by that line more precise. So they might express something about the actor's emotional state by saying that line either angrily or by saying it in more of a gentle, prodding, teasing sort of way. They might even switch up the pragmatics with that. Instead of addressing that line to Cordelia herself, perhaps they address it to an advisor to King Lear, making it aside. If she continues like this, nothing's going to come of it, thus changing the meaning that the sentence expresses. So there are all of these ways that the actor can take what's there in the text and elaborate on the fiction and the mental state of the character that it's expressing. And that's all true. I don't think any of us deny that, and that's a pretty large part of the actor's work. But it's all fairly obvious. I'm not sure that there's much to say or theorize about. And in particular, it's the sort of thing that any old mediocre actor is able to do. A mediocre actor, your actor at a local community theater production, they're able to communicate choices they've made about whether they're expressing Lear as being angry when he says nothing will come of nothing, or being still, kind toward Cordelia at that point and only letting the anger come later. What Zamir points out is that there seems to be something extra that really great actors do, as opposed to mediocre actors, that they express something with their voice that goes beyond merely indicating the mental states of a character or even their social status. And so that's the question that I want to take up today, is what is this extra thing, if anything, that these really good, competent actors are expressing. Zamir points out that, skipped ahead here, that one thing this might be is some sort of an authenticity. When you listen to Sir Ian McKellen perform Lear, there's a sort of authenticity that he expresses in his voice that you don't get, or you might not get, from the community theater actor who plays it in your hometown. So the question is, okay, so what is this extra something? What is this authenticity that the actor is expressing? So I thought we'd just run through some of the major theories of expression that some folks have touched upon this weekend. And what I want to argue is that, well, none of them really rise to the challenge of characterizing what this special thing is that Sir Ian expresses when he acts with his voice. So the first option are, broadly speaking, these causal theories of expression, which hold that expression is the result of something causing something else. So if you are expressing anger, well, you must have some mental state of anger, which is the causal antecedent to that expression for it to count as an expression. So how might we apply this to the theater? Well, it seems to me like there are two possibilities. So first hypothesis, we could just say, well, the actor's voice causally expresses the thoughts or the emotions of the character. That would be to say that the character, Lear's anger, causes the actor to use their voice in the way that they do. Well, I think we can dismiss this out of hand because it just relies on some pretty tenuous ontological commitments. Namely, you'd have to assume that fictional emotions of fictional characters are somehow causally efficacious on very real actors with very real voices. I suppose you could defend that, but it's a can of worms that I'm not ready to deal with right here. It seems like it's going to get way too complicated for what we have at hand. So let's consider a second hypothesis. This seems to be the hypothesis that a lot of the American method actors from around the middle of the last century really latched onto, was this idea that if an actor's voice is really expressing some sort of authenticity, it must be because something like a causal theory of expression is correct. So if you're Marlon Brando in A Streetcar Named Desire, the only way to really express the authenticity of Stanley Kowalski's anger is to actually feel that anger yourself and allow that to cause what you do with your voice. Now, I'm both dubious that method actors have ever really succeeded in this endeavor of actually having the mental states that cause their behavior on stage. And moreover, if they ever were successful, I think we'd probably find it rather aesthetically deficient. And that's because, well, gosh, if Marlon Brando actually was feeling Stanley Kowalski's anger and thinking Stanley Kowalski's thoughts, first off, it seems like it would be a quite dangerous situation. Who knows what he might do? He might actually harm somebody. Since actors don't seem to be doing this willy-nilly, it makes it doubtful that they actually are experiencing the emotions and the thoughts of the characters that they're playing. And if they were to do that, gosh, sitting in the audience watching them, one, we might feel physically threatened, and we might also be worried about the mental disposition of the actor up there, worried that they've gone into this realm of delusion rather than engaging in this act of make-believe or pretense up on the stage. I think we'd find that aesthetically worrisome. It would take us out of the fiction. So that's not the kind of expression that I take it that we're getting from Sir Ian's voice when he plays Lear. An alternative might be to say, well, we could just borrow from Peter Kivy or Stephen Davies these ideas of expression as resemblance that they talk about in pure instrumental music. We can just say, oh yeah, of course, this makes perfect sense. In the theater, an actor expresses anger when we can hear them as being angry. And you might think, well, okay, that makes sense. We don't have to assume that they are angry. We can just hear them as being angry, or we can hear them as resembling something that is angry. But my worry here is that this just isn't true in any strict sense. So think of any Shakespearean monologue like Macbeth, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. No one actually talks like that. That does not resemble how anyone who really is sort of worried about the meaninglessness of life actually appears. It does not resemble them. So it doesn't seem that actors really do resemble people who are in the throes of the emotions or the thoughts that they are nonetheless expressing. Furthermore, this is the sort of thing that if they do resemble those people who have those emotions or are having those thoughts, mediocre actors can do that just as well as Sir Ian, right? By modulating your voice, you can indicate, right, Lear is angry right now. He, more or less, or in some way or another, resembles someone who is angry. So this isn't going to do the job of trying to separate out what it is Sir Ian is expressing as opposed to your mediocre community theater actor. So alternatively, we could jump on to Gerald Levinson's idea that expression is hearing as somehow. So we could say, right, this fits the theater perfectly. An actor's voice can be heard as expressing some character's thoughts or emotions, and that's all that there is to what an actor is expressing with their voice. When we can hear Lear as being angry through what he's doing with his voice, well, then his voice is expressing anger, whether or not the actual actor playing Lear is angry or not. But again, this seems to be the sort of thing that mediocre actors do as well. So it doesn't distinguish between Sir Ian and the community theater actor. So we've got to cast around and find out just what kind of theory is going to account for the sort of expression that we're getting from the expert actor that we're not getting from others. I'm going to skip over this proposal and go immediately on to the positive proposal that Zamir mentions. And he says, well, look, failures of voice betray an incomplete incarnation. So to take the correlative of this, we might say, right, so the difference between the community theater actor and the expert actor is that the expert actor somehow expresses the extent to which they have fully incarnated the character. They're not just merely indicating what the emotional states or the thoughts of the character is. The mediocre actor can do that. Instead, they're expressing the extent to which they, the actor, have incarnated this fictional being, the character. Now, draw a veil briefly over just what exactly it means to incarnate a character, but just note right off the bat that this proposal is rather different than the ones we've just been considering. So it's what's being expressed by the actor's voice is not something about the character, but it's expressing something about the actor themselves. Indeed, expressing something about how the actor is related to the character. And it seems to take us back to this causal theory of expression, that the actor is able to express the extent to which they've incarnated the character only if they actually have incarnated the character in this more complete way. And it's because of that incarnation that their voice is affected in a way that expresses the completeness of that incarnation. So that's a suggestion that you can get out of Zamir, and I want to immediately try and think about, like, well, okay, so how exactly is the voice going to express this? Zamir doesn't say a whole lot about this, but he does point out, look, the voice has this amazing ability to capture just a whole variety of these tiny little transitions of inflection. For example, you get these little micro expressions in the voice that take place in the fraction of a second. With a mediocre actor, you tend not to get that with the reciting of lines. You get the broad thrust that Lear is angry right now, but you don't get this really detailed, subtle story within the voice of the different degrees of anger, or the way that one sort of anger or one thought is leading to another thought or an emotion within the bounds of less than a second. So it seems like he has in mind something, this idea that these good actors, they're able to particularize characters in this really minute and subtle way, so that what they're able to express is the extent to which they've really embodied the complexity, and in particular the mental complexity of the characters that they're playing. And so these little subtle variations in voice, that is what enables them to express that they have really incarnated the character in this deep and detailed way. So you get this complete incarnation by using the voice in this way that's nuanced and isn't being just fulfilling conventions about how angry people sound, and that comes second nature to the actor. That it seems as though it's so fluid and can express so much in such a short period of time that the actor somehow has really embodied the character in a great amount of detail. Now, I can see immediately Jerry Levinson in the audience there objecting to this, saying, wait a second, why do we have to go through this whole complex theory that the actor's voice is expressing something about the actor's relationship to the character? Can't we capture all this stuff that Zamir is talking about just using Levinson's theory, his hearing as theory? We can just say, look, when an expert actor uses their voice, we can perceive them as expressing these more nuanced, detailed, variegated emotions and thoughts and attitudes. And that's all there is that differentiates Sir Ian from the more mediocre actors, is that Sir Ian gives us acting that we can more easily hear as expressing these more detailed and nuanced expressions of emotion or thought. Now, here's a response to that. You might think, well, okay, if that's all actors are doing, though, it's unclear why we should aesthetically value actors at all in the first place. After all, you and I, just regular people, we are constantly, we really can't help but express thoughts and emotions in this nuanced way when we use our voices. We can't help but hear one another as doing those things. So it seems like if all we're getting from an actor like Sir Ian is just this ability to hear him as having a bunch of subtle, quick changes of emotion and thought, we might as well just do away with acting as an art form. Let's just replace all the actors with performance artists, for example, who really do experience these emotions and changes in thought, and we can just watch them as they in fact undergo those changes, and we can thereby hear them as, or see them as, undergoing those mental states. if this is going to be something valuable to acting in itself, it seems like we need to we need to say that there's something more going on with acting. Now, here Levinson might just come back and say, yeah, but if of course, if all there is to our aesthetic appreciation of this stuff is just seeing people who are expressing these really subtle changes in emotion and thought, well, sure, yeah, we could see performance artists, we could go around and chase ambulances, go and spy on people saying goodbye to relatives who are dying in hospital, but one, doing that is just inconvenient, and two, what actors allow us to do is to experience people who we can see as or hear as experiencing these emotions in this context, which is safe and limited, both physically and ethically. The big challenge here is going and chasing ambulances. You feel really ethically implicated in just using them as to satisfy your own aesthetic delectation, which is going to make at least myself, and I hope most of you, feel pretty terrible engaging in this sort of thing. So what we can aesthetically value about actors is they allow us to have this experience of hearing them as going through these vagaries of thought and emotion without implicating ourselves ethically or compromising ourselves physically in this way. And that's all there is to value about actors like Sir Ian. To this I respond, well, but we can only do that if we are at the same time we're able to perceive Sir Ian as going through these subtle changes in anger, that we're also able to perceive that he does not himself experience that anger, that he is not himself having those thoughts. So that what we need those actors to express with their voice is this sort of two-foldedness that Volheim talks about, that we have to be able to see at once these subtle changes and variegations in the emotional and cognitive states in the actors on stage. But we also have to have them express that that's a result not of they themselves having those thoughts and emotions. So that brings us back to this suggestion by Zamir that what actors actually are expressing is something about themselves. They're expressing that they have gone through what Zamir calls an existential amplification, that they've freed their voice from these conventions or what they might be embarrassed to do, so that they can just freely embrace all the subtleties that might be going through a voice of somebody that is experiencing these really subtle changes in emotion and thought. And what they're expressing is that they're not just allowing their own emotions and thoughts to bubble up to the surface, but they've really gone through some thought and created this very detailed expression of those subtleties for us. And the fluidity of the voice of a really good actor then also seems to give us somehow this notion that they've internalized that they're able to do it spontaneously almost. How they're able to do that, what they're doing when they do that, good question. I have no idea how to answer that question. So that's the idea that I just want to throw on the table here. I'll look forward to hearing challenges and questions you might have in the discussion period. Thanks for joining me today. Bye.